Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mountain Forest Floor Study in Faber Castell Polychromos color pencil. Just a moment. I just realized I was not spotlighted. Um, I am your instructor, Adrienne Hodge, and this is part two of a two-part class. So the first part of this class was last Wednesday. If you missed part one, you can still stick with us tonight, and then you can check out the recording on YouTube later. It's already up there. And then, like our moderator said, this class recording will be available on YouTube tomorrow, sometime early afternoon usually is when I see them posted. So keep an eye out for that. Or if I just, go a little fast in some parts of the class tonight, just know that you can always go back and rewatch the recording later. Okay, so we'll be finishing up this forest floor study in color pencil tonight, and then next week's class is wow, it's crazy that we're already at the end of March here. We only have 3 classes per month with me now. So instead of having 4 classes every Wednesday, I'm doing 3 classes a month, and then that are an hour and a half long each. So I know a lot of you have been very happy that we've been making the classes a little longer now, but that just means that we'll have a week break in between next week's class, and then the beginning of April. I believe I'm like, I need to look at the calendar, but yeah, there's more than 3 Wednesdays in March. So even though we've got part one of a 2-part class happening next week, there'll be a bit of a break before, and I'll repeat that next week as well. But it's a king trumpet mushroom study in gouache. So we'll be doing the first part of that next week, and then finishing that up in the first week of April. And you can find those upcoming classes where you found this one. And it looks like we've got the link to that in the chat now as well. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my tabletop view and go over supplies, and we'll get started. Okay, so don't forget to tag your work with those hashtags. Make it with Michael's or Michael's classes, and you can follow me on Instagram at Adrienne Hodge Art. And I'm also on Facebook, Adrienne Hodge Fine Art. There's some of my business cards I'm always flashing on screen. I've also got this online art club that I've been doing that is not affiliated with Michael's. It's an independent thing that I'm doing, but a lot of you have been joining me for that on Saturdays, and you can sign up for that through my link tree. And if you just go to my Instagram, Adrienne Hodge Art, and click on the link in my bio, that my link tree will take you straight to that. Or you can also Google link tree and my name, and it should come up pretty easily there as well. And you can also find the links to sign up for upcoming Michael's classes there as well. So I've just got all my handy links right there in that link tree. Okay, so we are working with these Faber Castell Polychromos colored pencils. I've got this pretty basic set of 12 here, and then I had a bunch of supplemental colors that were geared towards this specific image. So lots of greens and some grays and just lots of neutral tones for this forest floor scene that I added in, and that was all in the supply list there. I'm not going to list all those supplemental colors. And then we're also using toned paper. So I'm going to move this is where we left off last week. So we got to about here. So we're using the toned mixed media paper there. The Strathmore, I believe, is what was on the supply list. And then last week we used a sketchbook and some pencils. We're not going to really need that as much this week. You can use a kneaded eraser or a synthetic eraser, and I have both of those here. And that is pretty much it. And then we have our reference images, which were included as a PDF with the class supplies. And if you're watching later on YouTube, if you just click underneath the video where it says, you know, show more, like more information for the class, it'll have the whole supply list and the PDF for you to download there. So that's always nice. All of those supply lists and handouts are always included in the class recordings. Okay, so let's jump back in where we left off last week. I'm just going to review really quickly what we did for those of you who might just be joining and want to know, um, what you missed. So we started with our reference images. I included the black and white and then the inverted light version of the photo. And I'm a huge fan of inverting the light in a photograph so that we can see these value shapes, the shapes of the light and the shapes of the dark. So value is the light and dark of any one color. So like your grayscale, and I talk about light in terms of that grayscale from 0 to 10, 10 being the absolute black and 0 being the absolute white. And so when we invert the light, everything is reversed. So now all of the dark is showing up white and all of the white is showing up dark. So it makes it easier to pick out where those absolute highlights are. And there weren't a whole lot of them in this image. When we look at the true color, you can see there's just a little bit of like absolute white in between the trees in the far background. And then there's this one tree right here that gets like, it's like the Lord of the Rings tree. It's like really white there. And then that's kind of it. And then we've got, some lighter highlights. So when this inverted light is actually the inverted of the true color, not the black and white. So you can really pick out like where it's black, which is on that Lord of the Rings tree. I'm just going to go ahead and keep calling it that. And then what is that tree called? If somebody can put it in the chat if you know. No, it's in the third movie. They keep showing that white tree there at the end of the trilogy. Anyway, but yeah, and then we've also got this black way back here in the background. So we've got the light in the sky and then the light on that one tree. And then there's some other moments like here on the foreground tree where we've got some highlights. So anyway, all that to say is that's going to be really important today when we get to those like absolute white highlights, is noticing all of those things. And as I'm saying that, I just remembered one other thing that was on the supply list that I added that I forgot to grab and put on my desk was a Pentel white pen. So to really make some of those white highlights pop, I added some of that Pentel white pen. I'll have to dig that out of my supply bag in just a minute stealthily, because that's one thing I forgot to grab. But yeah, that'll be important there at the very end. Okay, so what we did last week to prepare was we just did a couple of sketches, sketching just the absolute dark values, looking at the reversed image here, the inverted image, just to pick out where those dark values were, where the black was. And then we sketched the light. So we just kind of did some quick little thumbnail sketches just to pick those things apart. And it's easy to get lost sometimes when you're sketching the inverted light and mix those things up, but it really doesn't matter. It's just these little thumbnail sketches are a way to warm up, to get acquainted with the value in the image, and also to kind of get like your bones of your drawing going. It's really easy to start jumping to the details right away and not to notice what those foundational things are that you need to build up to go more general to specific and be more successful in the long run. So that's why we started with all that in part one. Okay, and then we started to lay down the foundation for our little forest floor study here. I emphasized that results may vary. I put a little bit more time into this example than I usually do for class examples. So I wanted to, be sure to say that your results may not be identical to this by the end of the class. We're all in our different places in our art journeys. So, you know, just be gentle with yourself in regards to that and try not to compare yourself to my results or to the results of other people in the class who maybe, you know, have more hours accumulated in their art practice. And we started out really slow with our pressure. And I always like to say, you know, I'm not the boss of you. You can do whatever you want. So if you don't want to stay super light with your pressure like me and you want to go ahead and jump to putting more details in, you go right ahead and do what feels right to you. And a lot of people did that last week, and that is fine. But the way that I wanted to build this up was really focusing on the light, focusing on the colors that I'm seeing underneath, and more like I'm painting with these colors and building up to a point that I can get this like multi-dimensional depth to happen. So like in this area right here, this is where we left off last week. I was starting to get some darker values here in the little opening at the bottom of the tree. And I was using colors like blue and red and brown and orange and a lot of different colors here to build up to getting this sort of depth that you're seeing here. If you were to only use black in a shadow like this, it might feel a little flat. It might not have that same kind of depth that would happen if you added a brown at least, or a blue, or maybe some red, because I'm seeing some of those colors here. So some of it is imagined color, not, well, it's not imagined, but it's like a color that we're using based on color theory to kind of scaffold our colors and let the colored pencils mix and blend together. So none of it's really imagined. But some of it we may be kind of emphasizing, like we're going to use a lot of blue today, but I am seeing blue in a lot of places on this tree, so that's not even imagined. I don't know. I don't know why I said that, and then I'm trying to justify why I said it. You can always add some imagined color if you want, just to make it a little more fun and whimsical. But I really am seeing red here in this shadow, and I really am seeing orange, and I'm definitely seeing green. I think that's pretty obvious. And then even over here, there's a little red, maybe some purple, maybe some blue. It's hard to notice those things, but they're definitely there. And the more we put them in, the more we're going to end up landing somewhere that feels more realistic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just pick right back up there and continue layering some of those colors that I'm seeing down here in this area. And I'm going to start to today really start to bring more of the details to life here. So starting in this area. So I'm going to use quite a bit of these colors. I might just grab a few of them in my hand as I'm going. So I'm going to use my blue and my brown for sure. And this magenta color, it's number 133 in that basic set. I mean, we're really going to have almost all of these colors going in the last part of this class today. This olive green is definitely our friend. And this earth green, yellowish, number 168. And the olive green was 173. I know last week a lot of people were wanting me to call out the numbers on the color, so I'll try to remember to do that. Okay, so I'm just going to start building up those greens because I'm seeing a lot of green in my reference image here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have all of this on the screen at the same time. Maybe I can. Okay, so we always want to look for the color that is underneath, and we want to do that first. And I'm using the side of the pencil, using very little pressure. You know, last week we did a little demo on a separate piece of paper. I showed like how hard it is to erase colored pencil when you put the full pressure down on it. But if you use the side of the pencil and you use more of the muscle movement coming from your arm, then you're not putting down that, like, you're not embedding it into the surface of the paper, then you can erase anything. The other color that we were seeing a lot underneath stuff was this cream color. So cream 102 is the color that I'm using here. So I was like, oh yeah, there's that green underneath. And then I start doing the green and I'm like, but actually the yellow is underneath the green, or this cream color. So use the side of that cream color and get that built up there. And I'm remembering how at some point last week, I think I I had a lot of this already here and then I erased it out because I wanted to rework something. So, I mean, if we're going super light here, then we should be able to erase all of that, right? I can just take it right off. But if I'm putting the full pressure down, then there's kind of no going back. Okay, so I'm going to put this cream color down first. And yeah, I was seeing the cream color underneath the green. So that's what I wanted to erase so I could get that underneath there. So it just takes a bit of planning and noticing and seeing, what's underneath, what's the color that's underneath, and that's the color that you want to do first. Like there's this one moment right here where it's pretty white, but then there's some green on top of it. So we want to make sure we've got the white underneath right there. And we're really just not putting, or I am not putting my full pressure down until I start to get to like the last layer and those last little detail moments. That's when I'm going to start to really, like, that was the only place in the last class where I actually put pressure down on my pencil right there. Okay. And yeah, some of this stuff we had kind of laid the foundation of it super light in the beginning of the class. And now that I'm getting in there and looking a little more closely, I'm noticing, what order I want to put these colors down in. So I definitely want white underneath in this part of I'm looking at this part right here, this like third little root over here to the right. And then I'm probably going to want that cream color again right there. So just erasing out so that I can put that in a little more accurately now. And I know not everybody was following these, super light pressure instructions last time. And I already said, that's totally fine. But if you are, jumping ahead and putting those details on, and then you're like, well, dang, I don't have those same sort of results. It doesn't have that same multi-dimensional feeling to it, then you can always do another little study off to the side where you do follow this method. I know it's definitely takes a lot of patience. So I've got that white and that cream color. So now when I go on top of that with the green, I can see that white peeking through. I'm actually erasing some of that out because it looks like it needs just green in a moment there. But then there's also maybe some of this burnt orange here as well. So whenever I get a color like this burnt orange in my hand, I suddenly notice like all the places where I need that burnt orange. So I'm just jumping around And putting it in there in a few other spots as well. Okay. So I'm going to use my dark brown to start to put some of these dark values back in there that I took out. And I'm just, even though it is going to end up black, using dark brown or even my blue to start to put those darker shadows in are what is going to make it have that, you know, multi-dimension to it. So there's this little stick that comes kind of in between these roots here, or maybe it's another root. So it's going to get pretty dark right there, but I'm going to go ahead and just put my blue down first and then go over it with this dark brown. So it's the burnt umber. And it's going to look black, but it's going to be a black that has more dimension, more reflective light in it than just my straight up black colored pencil. And I can go ahead and use the top of the pencil and start to draw more directly in some of these places where it is going to end up black. Like I'm pretty sure, you know, once you start to get the proportions down here, we can, and I know a lot of you jumped ahead and already did this, so I might as well go ahead and do this. I'm going to start to draw in some of these black textures that I'm seeing here. Even if I have to erase something in this moment, these are definitely going to be here. You know, they're not going anywhere. Those darkest shadows are the darkest shadows. So you can go ahead and put the full pressure down in those places. At least, you know, just to get like the rough sketch so we can find our place here. But then, like I was using the brown, I can go over it with blue, or maybe I can add, like in this one, I feel like I see some green in there. So a lot of different colors all playing together here. And then, yeah, this is really getting back to where we were last week. I was starting to build up the gray tones using this cold gray. So underneath on the majority of this foreground tree, which this is really where we're going to focus a lot of our energy is on this foreground tree. We're going to leave a lot of this background very sketchy and underdeveloped. My main goal for this class is to try to fully develop this foreground tree. And then any detail I get in the rest of the drawing is just going to be bonus because we just don't have the time for me to use this process on the entire composition. So I'm going all the way up on my tree here and I'm putting in this cold gray. Let me just adjust my camera up here at the top for us. I'm seeing that gray tone as the underneath color on the foreground tree. And then my blue is definitely going to come in here next. So it's this light ultramarine 140. And I'm keeping my pencils pretty sharp tonight since we're going to be getting some of those more pointed details, but also I want to make sure I like really using the side of the pencil. So I'm keeping it really parallel to the paper, and that's how I'm getting just that low pressure thing to happen. So down this crack that runs from the top of the tree that's visible to us, all the way down, we've got that gray, and then we've got this blue. Like it's really this blended combination of gray and blue. that we're going to build up here quite a bit. And we'll get that darker gray going eventually too. And actually, let's start to draw in some of these more detailed moments up here as well so we can get our bearings. Okay, so this is where I want to be careful. So I've got this little shadow underneath here. That's the one we kind of anchored ourselves with right off the bat. And then it has another little darker moment right here, this little knobby moment on the tree. There's a lot of really wicked looking knobby moments up here. So I'm just sketching those in. And since that is going to be pretty black, I can go ahead when I feel like I've got those in the right place, go ahead and put a little more pressure to draw those in. And these are the areas where we're going to really get a lot of detail going. So all this bark that's like really interesting up here at the top. And then we've got a couple of branches, which you put as many of these in there as you want, but I'm just going to put maybe 2 or 3 of them in there. So we've got one kind of sticking off this way. And then one that goes up and out into the rest of our forest background there. And it's good to go ahead and establish these things fairly early on. That way, you know, you don't get too attached to something in the background and then have to draw over on top of it. And I just want to make sure that I can get that white highlight right next to it with my white pencil. So I erased out some of those other things that I had there. And this is kind of the main reason why I didn't advise pressing down too hard with your pencil, because if you already have pressed down with your pencil super hard in a lot of places, and then you're trying to put some of these details in, you're probably finding it really difficult to erase those moments. So all I did was just put the full pressure to draw that brown line and then erase everything underneath to be able to put the full pressure and draw the white line. And I'm already seeing that branch coming to life right there. So having all of this hyper, you know, focused, like it feels like we're not getting anywhere. We're just building up all this like light pressure, feathery stuff in the background. But once you start putting your detailed lines in sharp contrast to all of that blurry business, and then you're really starting to make the magic happen. So it doesn't take much after you've put in all that other hard work. It just takes, you know, some patience with that process to get to this point. Okay, and then I'll go back to, now that I've established those areas, although we could probably do that in a few more places. In fact, if we do this enough right here, if we have this forethought, then the Pentel white pen isn't necessary to make that sharp contrast happen. That pen is really kind of there as like a backup if you missed the opportunity to like create this contrast while you're making your drawing, then the pen can be a way to really get it to pop. Give it a little something extra there. But if I just erase what I have, I can put those high contrast white moments in there. And if it is just a super white highlight, then we can go ahead and press down on our pencil, and then that'll give us that high contrast we're looking for right there, and start to get those highlights to come to life. And we can go ahead and do that in a few other places. This will give us that gratification we've been waiting for. Get our little dopamine rush in. Some satisfying things to happen at this stage, even though we've still got a lot of work to do to build up our colors in some other areas. And yeah, if you feel like that high contrast is just not happening for one reason or another, that's where we can add the pen on top to create some high contrast that way. Okay. I feel like I've got a little bit more of an angle on my tree this time than I did the last time. There is a bit of an angle on the tree, but I did not put it in so much in my other drawing. I think I might just go ahead and straighten this one out a little more while I've got the opportunity here. Just gonna pull it out a little farther because down here I'm pretty far out away from that little knobby moment. I'm just defining where the edge of the tree is for myself now with the white. Maybe it's easier to bring it in slightly than it is to pull it out. Okay, so all I need to do now is just fill in my grass a little more over here, where I just brought the tree in a little further. Oops. I was coloring something that was not on camera there for a minute. Okay. So now we'll just keep building up these colors. We've kind of defined some of those edges. So I'm going back in with my gray. Oh, actually, do I need to bring the tree in even farther again? Okay, no, I'm gonna have it. It's just, I don't want this to not line up. Okay, so gray is my foundational color. And this is where you can really get creative with your colors here. Like that magenta maybe feels weird to use, but that's a great one to use right here to start to, I mean, the closer I look, I feel like I see magenta there. And maybe my eyes have a lot of years of practice of seeing these colors. It's definitely something that comes with looking. So one thing I tell people in my in-person classes all the time, I'm sure I've said it in a Michael's class at some point. If I haven't, it's worth repeating to y'all. Part of practicing art is just staring out the window. You just, stare at things for a long time. And the more you stare, the more you start to notice this stuff. And so, if somebody ever walks up and you're just sitting there staring off into space and they think you're not doing anything, you're like, I'm practicing art right now. I'm practicing looking. The longer you stare at a subject, the more you start to notice these colors and these value shapes. All right, so I switched between a few different colors while I was talking there. I put some blues, I put some greens. Like as I'm talking about seeing all these different colors are jumping out at me. One color that I need that I'm not seeing right in front of me is I need a dark blue, like an ultramarine blue. Is there not an ultramarine blue? There has to be. I feel like I used one over here. Did I just layer my blue and my brown enough to make it look like that? Hmm. All right, I'm gonna try this pine green right here. So I'm seeing something that feels like like a dark bluish, greenish something, and it looks like I put it in before, but I must have just layered my different blues and my browns and grays here. Okay, and then yeah, there's this really interesting crack. There's a few cracks, but there's this one that we're seeing on the bottom of the tree, and then up here and into our knobby moments. And then to the left of it, it's like this one crack kind of splits and then opens up again. So, but we don't want to just put black inside of this crack. I'm using this warm gray right now, but I'm going to go back over it with my blue, probably my brown. I'm going to get in there with a few different colors inside of that crack. This is my phthalo blue. So I think if I just layer this phthalo blue with the warm gray and that green, it's going to eventually, yeah, there we go. It's starting to feel more like a darker blue right there, because there's that kind of, it almost feels like somebody rubbed charcoal on the side of the tree right there, but maybe they had some charcoal with some blue paint in it, because there's definitely a blue tint. There's a blue hue to it. One thing you could do if you're like, you feel like your drawing is missing something and you're just not seeing it, you're not seeing what you're missing in regards to all of these colors, because I realize, you know, what we're doing tonight definitely does take a lot of practice to build up. Like if I wasn't telling you what colors here, maybe a lot of you wouldn't necessarily know what sort of color combinations to use here. Just doing like a little side by side, like in your phone, for example, you've got your little camera roll there. You take a picture of your drawing and then take this reference photo. And if you have any like collage apps that you use, like Instagram has an app called Layout that will just make like a quick little side by side collage, or maybe you have another app that makes collages that'll just, you know, put a couple pictures side by side together. And then you get them side by side, and then you can see, you know, like, oh, what does my drawing need that I'm seeing in the photograph that I'm not seeing in the drawing? That's one way to kind of compare and contrast and look and see things that are hard to see. You know, in an in-person class, we might put something up on the wall and then put the reference photo next to it and step back, you know, at least 5 or 6 feet away from it and look at it from a distance across the room. And that's one way to see things that are like when you're right up close to your drawing, sometimes you get a little lost in it and it's hard to see what you might be missing. So that's one way, just to see these things that might not be so easy to see. So getting some distance from it or putting it side by side. You know, if you had a printout of the photograph, you could do that. You could pin it to the wall, pin it to your refrigerator with some magnets, and put the printout next to it, and then step back away from it and just stare at it. Just look at it for a long time. Sometimes it really takes looking for a long time to start to see this stuff. Okay, as I was talking, I was just building up a few more colors. I feel like it's kind of hard to narrate when I'm like there's so many different colors that I'm adding in here. But I'm using a lot of different greens. I'm using those grays and the blues. just starting to really build up this depth that I'm seeing here in all of these shadows on the knobbier parts of the bark. And as we get into the knobbier parts of the bark, that's where we want to make sure that we are kind of thinking about those contours, like making our lines follow these little dips and curves and roundedness here. And likewise on the whole of the tree itself that we've been focusing on, thinking about that cylindrical shape, like as we kind of wrap around there towards the edges. So far we've been in this, I've been over here in this vertical area of the tree building up colors, but if you do start to get over there towards the edge of the tree, just make sure you're keeping in mind that little rounded curve at that edge. Okay, I don't want to bounce around too much. I'm going to get lost. One thing I left out right here was this knobby moment, and now I'm like, I guess I left it out in my other drawing. I don't see it there. Okay, because we can't put all of the knobby moments in there. There's so many of them. So I kind of just picked 3 of them. And then in the rest of this, I'm just layering my colors. I'm going to zoom in on the photo right here where I'm focusing on for a second. So I'm looking at this area right here, and that's where I'm seeing like the blues and the greens and the grays. But then there's also that burnt orange and probably my terracotta color will come in handy right here. But the terracotta and the burnt orange are kind of the last thing that I want to put on there. That's kind of the color that's going to be the top color. So I really want to make sure I've got enough grays and greens and everything over here. And yeah, I edited out one of these knobby moments, so I'll just go ahead and just kind of imagine that this extends a little right here, the shadow. Or really just keeping my colors all in the same color family and just kind of blending them all together right here. That'll be nice. I also just looked at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the thing about this class that I have to be aware of is it's so easy to get sucked into these details. But also I set the goal to just develop the tree. So if that's all I do, then I did my job. All right, I think that's enough of building up those colors right there. We can start to push this drama a little bit more. So I'm going to get my magenta out again for some of these little cracks. And this is kind of just a safe way to put the cracks in with a little bit, with a darker color that's still on the lighter side. So just in case I do something that I'm like, ooh, I want to erase that. It might be a little easier to erase in magenta than it will be if I put it in with the dark brown or blue. But if I'm putting my full pressure on it, then it's going to be hard to erase no matter what. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, that's starting to look pretty good. Okay, I think I'm ready for my terracotta color and my burnt orange. So I'm using a little bit more pressure here. And then I'll go ahead and get that dark brown out again. And start to draw more of these detail moments, keeping in mind how we've got cylinders here on these little sticks, these little branches. So we want to draw kind of the little edge of them and give them contour. You can put a few more branches in there if it feels right to you. Let me start to really push some of these other pieces of bark and all this texture now that I've got my base layers filled in. I'm just kind of drawing the little cracks and shapes that I'm seeing in between all the bark. And then in this super dark shadow moment, that's where I can go ahead and put my full pressure down on the brown. And if it's still feeling kind of flat, then I can go back over it with blue or something else. Maybe you might use a little bit of stippling right here for some of this texture as well. I'll do some little dots. And then, yeah, anywhere where I'm like, oh, I don't like how much magenta I used right there, for example. I mean, I kind of just used the magenta just to go a little more timidly into it. Now I can go over the magenta with the brown. I can do that again with the blue. I'm just building up my colors rather than using black. Like you could have easily done that right there in black instead. And it might have had a similar effect, but it's just going to have more dimensionality to it if we use all these colors. So like in this big crack right here, make it nice and thick with my blue. But then I'm going to go over that again with my brown, and that's going to look black. And then if it still doesn't have that contrast that I'm looking for, then I can go over it with my black pencil, but it's going to have all these other colors underneath so that it just feels really rich. Yeah, that really has some depth to it now. So if I do that same thing in all these other dark shadowy places, like I already did the brown and all those deep dark shadows. And then I did magenta, I did blue, maybe even another brown or a green in there too. Like especially if you see like a certain color right there at the edge of that shadow. Like I do see green right there at the edge. It'd be nice to go ahead and put some green in there as well. It's like here on this knobby moment, I see a bunch of green. I feel like this whole knobby area needs more to have the same effect as the other drawing, but just try not to rush to the point where I use the black on top of it. Okay, so now I got all those other colors underneath, and then I use the black. Now it's going to really have some sharp contrast. All right, that's what I'm talking about, y'all. Okay, Now you do that same thing in all these other dark shadows. Yeah, nothing is stopping you from doing the black first and then just adding these other colors on top of it. So if you already did black and all these shadows and press down with the full pressure and you feel like it's too late, try to add those other colors on top where, you know, maybe they'll still kind of attach themselves. It's possible, but it's not going to have the same effect as building up with the other colors underneath first. Okay, so in the event that we don't have enough time to get to like I'm gonna go scooch back down here to the bottom of the tree. You know, anything I don't get to, but is that highly detailed, or you want to be that highly detailed in your study here, you just use that same method of looking and studying and seeing what colors we need to build up to. Okay, so we kind of already started down here and then I jumped up there to the top and got sucked into it. So let's do the same thing down here again. And it's amazing to me how like just really getting in there and studying those colors, like it starts to make everything look different. Like I feel like this bottom part of the tree all of a sudden looks so much different to me now after studying the top part there. Like after a day of working in my studio all day long, I used to really burn the midnight oil in my studio a few years ago. I haven't done that in quite a while, but I would be driving home past midnight and after painting for 12 hours all day long, because I used to just have the coolest studio space that just felt like such a clubhouse. I could just stay in there all day and just get lost in my work. And anyway, I'd be at a stoplight, and I'm like, wow, like the light reflecting on the completely sober, by the way, y'all, just looking at the lights at the street at the stoplight, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm seeing all these colors reflected, and I just like think I need to take a photo because it looks so amazing. And then later I'd be looking through my phone like, why do I have this random photo of the stoplight in here? It's like, because apparently it was really magical after painting all day long. It really makes you notice things out in the world that you maybe are not noticing when you look this deeply. It's something like a tree for hours and hours. Okay, so just doing the same thing down here now, just starting to build up all these colors that I'm seeing in the shadows. A lot of green down here at the base of the tree. So I've got my olive green, yellowish color. I love that it sounds like I'm making up that name. It's not, I'm not calling it just yellowish. It's called olive green yellowish 173. There's a lot of that down here, and there's a really fun little kind of knot or spiral happening. So I'm putting that in. And this may look a little bit different in everybody's drawings. Like we're not robots. So just, embrace how your interpretation of this knot in the tree is going to be slightly different than everybody else's. It's going to be different than mine. It's going to be different than other folks in the class who are going to hold up their examples, but we're all going to have, you know, something that's fairly similar. But some of our trees might be a little wider, some of them might be a little skinnier, some of them might have more emphasis. on some of these colorful moments, or maybe you chose to emphasize a different, part of the bark than I did. So just follow wherever your interest in this tree is taking you, because there's a lot of details. So I'm using my magenta again right here to build up this little character moment right there. And yeah, I really am just picking out a couple of areas because there's just not enough time to put in all of the details. And that magenta is probably my favorite color to use for places where it's going to end up black, but it's just a non or feels slightly non-committal. The blue would be another good one. And then, yeah, there's back to this moment where I'm feeling magenta on the side of the tree right there. And I'm still using light pressure because there's definitely some moments where I'm going to want to put like those strong white highlights in here. And if I've already pressed down too hard with my pressure with these other colors, I'm not going to be able to put the pressure on with the white. No, I just noticed I put this little, yeah, my proportions are definitely off on some of this bark. This should have been way down here. Oh well, pretend it's way up there. Okay. Start to get more detail on the roots as well. There's one little highlight here at the edge of this dark area where I feel like I want to see this highlight coming through. So I just erased all of that underneath so that I could put this cream color there, because I feel like having that highlight will just create some contrast I'm looking for right here. So if there's a moment that you really want to put in a highlight and the pencil's just not letting you, try to erase in that area first so that you can put the full pressure down. You might be able to, or if you already put the full pressure, then it's not going to let you erase it. And then you have to just deal with it. So yeah, just having that highlight, I don't know, it's just going to help it feel a little more, have that depth right there a little more. I'm going to start to put some of these details in the ground around it. So one kind of trick, if there's an area that you feel like you just want to make it feel developed a little faster, developing the area around it can just make it come to life a little more. So just putting in some of those like sticks in the foreground, or just a few little loose moments here. And obviously we don't have the time to develop all the areas in the rest of the drawing. Like I said, we're just gonna focus on this foreground tree the most here. But the same thing goes for, you know, any other part of this that we don't get to, like to start to develop it more, maybe just draw in some of the details that you're seeing. You could use like your magenta color if it's going to end up being super dark. That's a low commitment way to start to draw in some of those dark lines and just like bounce around in this little forest yard here and put in like a few little detail moments like that, or you know, just to get it to be a little bit more than the blurry sketch that we have back there. And somehow that makes that tree look more developed too by having some details on some stuff around in the foreground too. If we had these sticks, I wish we had more time on this one. I could definitely do a 6-hour class on this forest floor scene. I mentioned in part 1 that I spent probably closer to 5 hours on this example here, so I just can't get that level of detail on the whole thing, but can get us as far as I can. Okay, we're into the 7 o'clock hour now for me. Let's see, let's get back to the base of the tree before I get too sucked into my foreground here. Okay, so I went around with the magenta. I said I wanted to develop this root a little more. So let me start to do that. I'll draw in the little edge there. Yeah, and sometimes I do that, like needing to put in some of that stuff right there. I did that to help anchor myself a little more right here as well. Like it's easy to get lost in stuff like these tree roots and be like, where am I on the tree roots, you know, when I've kept it so blurry. So zooming out a little bit and being like, okay, well, here's the stick that's in front, and here's these sticks over here. Then I can kind of use those to help anchor and measure where I am in regards to these tree roots so I don't get too lost in them and end up fudging my proportions a little bit too much here. Okay. Put in some gray right here. I want some gray on the stick. Yeah, see, I kind of made that a little too close together, but that's okay. There's no space between this root and this stick, but I'm still going to put it in there. It's like a fallen branch that's got a lot of the same colors as our tree root there. So it's got gray underneath and maybe even it needed that cream color underneath it too. I could just leave it out. I could just take it out, but I've already put the shadow underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in there. It's just in a different spot. And then it's got green and brown on top of it. And we've got lots of green on the rest of the root. Yeah, I have really moved some stuff around here on the base of the tree, but I'm just going to keep going even though my placement of some of these roots are not quite where I want them to be. We're getting to the point in the class where this needs to just be good enough. if I had more time, I would probably just erase all of this out and put it where it actually goes proportionately to each root, proportions to each other. I'm putting that cream color back in underneath. And yeah, I'm just deciding to live with it being a little bit different than the reference photo. All right, I am putting more full pressure here on this cream color now to start to build up these colors a little more quickly. And we definitely want this white to be nice and strong here. I'll go ahead and put the full pressure on that white. And there's actually a lot of white over here. Now that I've got all these other colors, I can go ahead and do the full pressure there. And yeah, when I put this full pressure on this white and start to drag it up the side of the tree into all these other colors that I've already laid the foundation for, then they, will blend with this white. Like you could do the white first, but I think leaving spaces and then putting the white in between is a better way to go, because it's just too tempting to like press down on that white and then you lose the ability to erase right there. But now that I've like scaffolded everything with these other colors, I can go in with the white and really start to pull it together using that white. And if you want to go a little more slowly, maybe use more stippling right here, but still with the full pressure. All right, it's really starting to come together now. Now I'm getting all these highlights in here with the white. Yeah, I can like stipple the white. These are the moments where the pen can really help to create this contrast. And as I'm talking, I realized I still need to grab my pen for that last little flourishes with the pen moment here that's coming up. In fact, are there any questions that have come up that I could address while I look for my white pen real quick? Let's see. I'm looking at the chat and I'm not seeing any questions that are jumping out at me. Saw something about an angle of my, like, I don't think my desk is at a slight angle. I've got a, a drafting table here that could be possibly what you were picking up on. Right, boy, that Pentel white pen is, I was just using it 2 days ago. I'm not doing it, but I know I have I have some white gel pens right here, so I might just improvise a little bit and use one of those instead, although they're not going to give me the same fluidity as that Pentel white. But I have that other example to refer back to. And I can definitely, like, let me see here. If the gel pen will do the same sort of thing. Okay, so if you kind of missed the opportunity here to get, like, is it gonna do it? The gel pen doesn't quite have that same fluidness as the other pen does. Let's see, maybe I can do it here in these moments. Maybe I can get it on one of these little sticks, these branches sticking out. There we go. Okay, so yeah, the white pen can just be a way to add some of these highlights if you know, need that little extra pop. But the Pentel white pen definitely has a little more fluidness to it, so it comes out on top of that thick colored pencil a little more. It'll stand out a little more than this gel pen is doing, and you'll get more of that effect that you're seeing there in my other example. Okay. I'll be honest, I've had that little, I mean, you'll probably seen it on screen the whole time. It's been helpful to me to like see the choices that I made there to try to speed myself up a little more here. Okay, so I feel like that's looking pretty good on the base of the tree. The one thing I haven't done down here yet is used this terracotta and burnt orange to try to put in some of these little detail moments. And also I still haven't gone over my darkest areas with my brown and my black yet. So like I did the magenta and the blue in some of these little bark moments. Let me go back and do that again with the brown and the black and make those more sharply contrasted. And same thing in all these little moments where it gets super dark. So we can start to really push the contrast in these shadows. Oh, that looked like a nice comment that just popped up. I want to read that one out loud. Karen said, learned much and think it's time for some brilliant colored pencils. Heck yeah. I think you mean it's time for you to create lots of work with some colored pencils, or maybe to get more colored pencils. Because yeah, definitely the more colors you have, the more you can really bring this to life here. Either way, I agree with what you're saying. Okay, so now I've got my black here. And yeah, to create these like little texture moments, this is where using some stippling could really start to create this texture that I'm seeing in the bark. So just doing like one little dot at a time. And if you build up your dots with other colors and then go over them in black, you know, that'll obviously, like we've been doing so far, will give it even more depth. But I just did it with just black right there. And then I think I haven't put black in this part of this crack yet here. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then I don't think I ever used black on this part of the shadow, so that could really push my contrast here now that I'm built up all these other values of colors. And that's really satisfying. And likewise here in like these little extra texture moments in the foreground that we put in, adding black to those. Basically just, there's a lot of dark values in this image. But if we were to jump straight to using black right away, we're not going to have that same effect. So it's easy to get lost in all these other colors and then realize, oh, hey, I haven't actually used the black right there yet. But if I just kind of slow down and go back to where we started in last week's class now, just to bring it back a little more full circle here at the end, using the side of the pencil, like once, if you're at the same part that I am, if you've been really following along, which I wonder how many of you have really stuck with me in this like very complicated drawing and haven't gone off on your own little tangents with this one. But if you've really been sticking with me and covering every area that I have at the same time as me, then this is a good moment to take that black back out and do what we did at the beginning, where we just kind of softly put in those darker values. Because now we're here at the, where we've fully developed some areas, and then we've got some areas that are very underdeveloped. So you can kind of go back in and do another pass, because I mentioned that this is like painting, right? So for those of you who have done a lot of painting and you've heard or use that term like making a pass over your painting, you're doing a pass over the whole thing, and you're putting in your dark and light values. And then you go in and you build up layers and stuff, and then you do another pass, and you keep doing that same sort of thing. And like since I've developed some areas and other areas not, I really could use an anchor of this black or maybe this dark brown, just like a little soft edge to like reestablish where these dark values are, because there's a lot of them and we have not addressed so many of them in the background here, just focusing on this foreground tree the most. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of bounce around with my black pencil here in the foreground and establish some of this to anchor us here in the foreground. Hope that hasn't been too confusing having both of the images back to back there. Hopefully it's been more helpful than confusing. I feel like having it like that has been helpful to me, but I don't know if it's been helpful to everyone else. Okay, and then I can use those other colors that we used early on. This is just kind of the second layer that we've done really to the forest floor, or that I have, because I kind of just established that first layer and then started focusing on the tree. But I just want to bring some of this a little more to life here, since it is in the foreground and it is connected to the foreground tree. So I'm using the side of that terracotta pencil. And remember last week we talked about really establishing that diagonal flow of the kind of zigzag path down the mountainside here. I just need another layer or two right here before I can put any more details on these twigs that are laying in front of the tree. So I just need a little bit more of a grounded layer. This probably would have helped me not get so lost in those tree roots if I'd had more going on in the foreground. But sacrifices were made. Okay, and then the other color that I used a lot in my other drawing was the magenta in the foreground. I used the side of my magenta pencil to just give that, because it's not really all terracotta or burnt orange, and it's not all dark brown. I feel like the dark brown can like kind of take over really quickly. So this magenta kind of gives it a little bit more volume without overtaking it with the dark brown. And I'm just keeping in mind that downward slope, that kind of crisscross diagonal idea. So it's not flat here, not even in the very foreground. It's still on a slope. All right, and then once I've got those colors in there, although I'm like, I see even more magenta right here. And this is the kind of stuff where if you put it side by side, the image in your drawing, you maybe will start to see in these areas that we just don't have the time for me to walk you through how I would handle them, you know, maybe even take out your colored pencils and like hold it up next to the photograph and see like, is it this color? What color is it that is needed right there? Might be a combination of 3 or 4 colors. Okay, now I've got my dark brown, and so I can go really soft with that dark brown and start to get something that matches what the forest floor, it feels like mulch right there. That mulch is doing, but without it, you know, I feel like if you just used dark brown, it could easily feel a little flat. Okay, and then, wow, that time goes by so fast. And then the other thing I wanted to do was just put a few more little hard line details in here. You know, and this is where you can go back in with your black and put the full pressure when you're ready. Another thing I wanted to make sure to mention was like putting some of these like vertical line texture in on the side of the tree. That can really start to make it come to life. But you can do that same sort of thing like in all the places here. You could do that like here on the root, could really start to bring that to life, just putting like a diagonal line that follows the contours of the root there, or maybe, you know, drawing in some of these sticks or like stippling around. It looks like I just sketched a face right there. But yeah, just some fun little scribbly moments. I'm gonna do a cooking show thing and just jump to my other example here, the one that I spent way too many hours on. Um, and yeah, I did that same sort of thing with like the white, going in and doing like some scribbly, sketchy moments with the white highlights. You can do it with the white pen as well. But all of those things are just gonna bring it to life even more. But you don't have to put like a lot of detail in there. You can just bounce around and just get a little bit of texture, because, you know, it would take a lot of time to put every little piece of every little stick and, you know, whatever squiggle that's happening in that mulch. There's a lot of busyness happening there. And then same thing with the backgrounds here. You're just on these background trees, just get in there and just build in that that value based on the colors that you're seeing. And what's the color that's underneath? What's the color that's on top? There's so many greens that I had you get, and we mostly used them on the foreground tree, but there's also lots of different layers to the greens that you're seeing on the leaves in the background if you had the time to really develop those. Just look at the green that you're seeing underneath and then build up those layers like you're painting. All right, y'all. That is gonna do it for me. I feel like I got pretty far with that. I'm pretty happy with it in 3 hours. I think that's a good place to land. And we've got a few minutes left, so if you want to hold up your drawing for me and share how far you got, I'd love to see your examples. We can spotlight you. Oh, wow. Look at that, Bob. That is beautiful. Oh my goodness. Oh, I don't know if this is actually Bob, but that's what your your camera said. Oh, and this is William. Lovely, William. Yes. Oh, I love the stylized quality that's happening on your work. That's really fun. Well, can you hold it back a little bit, Barbara? Let me see the bottom. Yeah. Oh, and I see you got the white pen going there for some of those highlights. That's gorgeous. Oh, Dorothy. Yeah. Ooh, look how you've got like a windswept thing going. I'm really feeling some movement. Oh, that is beautiful. Yeah, I love the stylized thing that's happening in so many of these. And this is Karen. Oh, yeah, that one's got a stylized quality too. Oh, that feels like a storybook illustration. It's beautiful. I love the horizontal orientation of that. Monica, lovely. Yeah, really feeling that depth in that little tree doorway. This is Bess. Oh, that's lovely as well. Yeah, it really has some good depth down there. I feel that depth so much. Oh, this one has a windswept feeling to it too, Claire. Really nice. And there's one. Oh, yeah. Oh, I love how you really zoomed in on that. What am I trying to say? That little log there by the roots. There's a lot of really great texture down there. And I really feel that path happening through your background there into the woods. Oh, those were lovely. I wish I could stare at those a little longer. Y'all please post them online somewhere or send them to me. I'd love to see them or save them in a folder for when I might teach this again with students. Thank you all so much. This was so lovely. Looking forward to the king trumpet mushrooms next Wednesday. And then if you want to check out my draw club, we're going to be drawing an echinacea flower this Saturday, and I've got pictures of that on my Instagram. So go check out my Instagram at Adrian Hodge Art, and you can follow the link in my bio if you'd like to sign up for that. But otherwise, I'll see you back here for King Trumpet Mushrooms Part 1 next week. Thank you all, and have a wonderful evening.